Everyone in the yard heard it before they saw it. That sharp, mocking laughter inmates use when they think they've found fresh meat. The new guy had barely stepped onto the concrete before a group of loudmouth inmates circled him, pointing at the ink on his forearm. A simple tattoo. Black lines. Faded. Nothing flashy. "Bro, what is that supposed to be? Looks like a kid drew it. Hey, new boy, your tattoo artist hate you or what?" Laughter exploded across the yard. Even guards smirked. But the new inmate didn't react. He didn't explain it. Didn't defend it. He just rolled his sleeve back down, calm, almost too calm. That's when the mood shifted. Because from the far end of the yard, every inmate suddenly fell silent. The prison gang leader, the man nobody touched, nobody disrespected, nobody even looked at without permission, was walking toward them. And for a moment, everyone expected him to join in the mocking. Instead, he stopped right in front of the new inmate, looked at the tattoo, and his face changed like he'd just seen a ghost. Then, in front of hundreds of prisoners, the gang leader did something no one in that yard had ever seen before. He raised his hand and saluted the new guy. The laughter died instantly. The guards froze. Even the loudmouths backed away like they had touched fire. Because in that moment, everyone realized the truth. That tattoo didn't make the new inmate weak. It made him untouchable. Stay with me until the end. Because what that tattoo really meant, and why the most feared man in the prison saluted him, shocked every single inmate in that yard. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Now let's get started. His name was Marcus Chen, 34 years old. Clean record until 3 months ago when a drunk driving accident changed everything. The judge gave him 18 months at Riverside Correctional, a medium security facility where first-time offenders learned fast that your past meant nothing inside those walls. Marcus had arrived on a Tuesday morning, clutching a single bag of approved belongings: gray sweatshirt, basic toiletries, 3 photographs of his daughter. He looked exactly like what the other inmates expected. Another scared suburban dad who'd made one bad decision too many. The processing officer, Sergeant Williams, had seen thousands of new arrivals over his 20-year career. Accountants, teachers, construction workers, all looking the same way Marcus looked now. Nervous, pale, trying to appear tough while their hands shook during fingerprinting. "First time inside?" Williams asked, not looking up from his paperwork. Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. Piece of advice. Keep your head down. Don't owe anybody anything. Don't accept anything for free. And whatever you do, don't show weakness in the yard." Marcus absorbed every word, but his mind was elsewhere. 3 days earlier, his ex-wife had brought their 8-year-old daughter to visit him in county lockup. The little girl had pressed her face against the glass partition and asked why Daddy had to go away. He didn't have an answer that made sense to an 8-year-old. The intake process dragged on for hours. Medical examination, psychological evaluation, assignment to cell block C. By the time Marcus reached his cell, afternoon count was already underway. His cellmate, a wiry man named Rodriguez who'd been inside for 2 years on drug charges, barely glanced up from his book. "You the new fish?" Rodriguez asked. "I'm Marcus. Wasn't asking your name. I was asking if you're fresh meat." Rodriguez finally looked at him. "Yeah, you are. Listen close, fish. First week is survival. After that, you might make it to your release date without getting shanked or beaten into a coma." Marcus unpacked his few belongings in silence. The cell was smaller than his daughter's bedroom. 2 bunks, a metal toilet, a sink that dripped constantly. The walls were covered in scratches and faded graffiti from previous inmates who'd counted days until freedom. "What's your story?" Rodriguez continued. "Drugs, theft, domestic violence, vehicular manslaughter," Marcus said quietly. "Drunk driving. I hit another car." Rodriguez whistled low. "That's heavy, man. How much time you got?" 18 months. Could be out in 12 with good behavior." "Good behavior." Rodriguez laughed. "You think this is summer camp? You think you just keep quiet and follow rules and everyone leaves you alone?" Marcus didn't respond. He was staring at a photograph of his daughter, taken at her last birthday party. She was smiling, holding a piece of cake, completely unaware that her father would soon destroy everything. The first few days passed without incident. Marcus attended mandatory orientation sessions, learned the daily routine, figured out which guards to avoid and which ones actually cared about doing their jobs right. He kept to himself during meals, found a corner table in the library, stayed out of conversations that could lead to trouble. But isolation only worked for so long in a place where predators studied new arrivals like wolves watching wounded deer. The yard was where reputations were made and destroyed. A concrete rectangle surrounded by 30-foot walls topped with razor wire. Basketball courts on one end, weightlifting area on the other. Picnic tables scattered throughout where different groups claimed their territory. Marcus had been avoiding the yard for his first week, using library time and extra work duty to stay indoors. But eventually, even the most careful inmates had to face the social hierarchy that governed life behind bars. It was a Thursday morning when he finally walked outside. The sun felt good on his face after days under fluorescent lights. He found an empty spot along the wall and tried to blend into the background. That's when he noticed the stairs. 3 inmates near the basketball court were watching him. Then 5, then a dozen. Word traveled fast in prison, and apparently everyone already knew about the new guy who kept to himself. "Hey, college boy," one of them called out. "You too good to talk to people?" Marcus didn't respond. Rodriguez had warned him about this moment. The test. How new inmates reacted to their first challenge determined everything that happened afterward. "I'm talking to you." The voice got louder, closer. Marcus turned around. The speaker was built like a truck, arms covered in gang tattoos, face scarred from old fights. Behind him stood 4 other inmates, all watching with the focused attention of people about to witness violence. "I heard you," Marcus said calmly. "I just don't have anything to say." "Don't have anything to say." The big inmate smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "That's interesting. Most people, when they're being polite, they introduce themselves, share their story, show a little respect." A crowd was gathering now. Other inmates sensed the tension and moved closer, forming a loose circle around Marcus and his questioner. Guards in the towers could see what was happening, but they wouldn't intervene unless weapons appeared or blood started flowing. "My name is Marcus. I'm here for 18 months. I don't want any trouble." 18 months. The big inmate nodded thoughtfully. "That's not much time. Means you probably did something stupid instead of something evil. What was it? Taxes? White-collar stuff? Drunk driving accident?" Marcus admitted. "Killed somebody?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Every conversation in the yard had stopped. Even inmates who'd been shooting baskets were now standing still, listening. "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "Well, damn." The big inmate's expression changed slightly. "That's actually worse than I expected. See, most of us in here, we hurt people who deserved it. Drug dealers who ripped us off, guys who disrespected our families, people who had it coming. But you killed some innocent person just because you couldn't call an Uber." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Every night since the accident, he'd replayed those same thoughts. The randomness of it, the senselessness, the fact that his victim had simply been in the wrong place when Marcus made the worst decision of his life. "That's when I knew I had to step in." The voice came from behind the crowd, deep, authoritative, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Back off, Thompson." Every head turned toward the speaker. Walking across the yard with measured steps was Antonio "Ghost" Morales, 6'3", 220 pounds of muscle earned through 15 years of prison workouts. His arms were covered in intricate tattoos that told the story of his rise through the ranks of the Sangre Nueva cartel. But it wasn't his size that made grown men step aside when he approached. It was the reputation that preceded him. Ghost had killed 3 men inside these walls, not in fits of rage or desperate self-defense, but with the cold calculation of someone who understood that respect in prison was measured in blood. The guards knew it. The warden knew it. Everyone knew it. But proving it was another matter entirely. Thompson, the big inmate who'd been interrogating Marcus, immediately lowered his voice. "Just talking to the new guy, Ghost. No problems here." "I didn't ask if there were problems," Ghost replied, his eyes never leaving Marcus. "I said back off." The crowd began to disperse, but slowly. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. But nobody wanted to risk Ghost's anger by staying too close. This was uncharted territory. Ghost never involved himself in the hazing of new inmates. He had lieutenants for that kind of work. Marcus stood perfectly still, unsure whether this intervention was rescue or something far worse. He'd heard Ghost's name whispered in the chow hall, seen other inmates literally cross to the other side of corridors when Ghost walked through. Whatever was about to happen, Marcus knew his survival depended on reading the situation correctly. Ghost stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could see the details of his face tattoos. A skull above his left eyebrow, the words "Born to Die" scripted along his jawline. But his eyes, they were studying Marcus with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "Show me your arm," Ghost said quietly. Marcus hesitated. Rolling up his sleeve had started this whole confrontation, but refusing Ghost wasn't an option. Not unless Marcus wanted to end up in the infirmary, or worse. He pushed up the fabric of his gray sweatshirt, revealing the tattoo that had caused so much laughter minutes before. It really was simple. Black ink, faded from age, forming what looked like 3 interlocking triangles with a small number underneath. To most people, it meant nothing. Prison artwork, gang symbols, random geometric shapes. But Ghost's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His expression shifted from casual interest to something approaching shock. He leaned in closer, studying the ink like he was reading a classified document. "Where did you get this?" Ghost asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Afghanistan," Marcus replied. "Forward Operating Base Chapman, 2009. The words hung between them like an electric charge. Ghost straightened up, his entire demeanor changing. The predatory stillness was replaced by something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Recognition, respect, maybe even fear. "You were there," Ghost said. It wasn't a question. "3rd Battalion, 10th Mountain Division, combat engineer, 15 months deployment?" Ghost nodded slowly, processing this information. Around them, the yard had gone completely silent. Even inmates who'd been across the basketball court were now straining to hear the conversation between the most feared man in the prison and the new guy everyone had been mocking. "What was your call sign?" Ghost asked. "Breacher," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Marcus Chen, Staff Sergeant, United States Army." That's when Ghost did something that shocked every witness in that yard. He took 3 steps back, came to attention, and rendered a perfect military salute. His hand snapped to his forehead, his back straightened, his feet came together at precise angles. It was the salute of a soldier recognizing a superior officer. The silence that followed was deafening. Guards in the towers leaned forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. Inmates who'd been laughing minutes before now stood with their mouths open, realizing they'd just witnessed something unprecedented. Marcus, after a moment of surprise, returned the salute with equal precision. 2 veterans, separated by different wars and different choices, sharing a moment of military protocol in the middle of a prison yard. When they lowered their hands, Ghost's expression had completely transformed. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by something approaching reverence. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Ghost said formally. "Lance Corporal Antonio Morales, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force. Fallujah, 2004. Ramadi, 2005. Semper Fi, Marine," Marcus replied. "Hua, Sergeant." The exchange of military courtesies in a maximum security prison was surreal enough. But what happened next would become legend among the inmates. Ghost turned to address the crowd that had gathered. His voice carried across the entire yard, reaching every corner where inmates had stopped their activities to watch. "Listen up," he announced. This man is not to be touched, not disrespected, not threatened, not asked for anything. Anyone who has a problem with Staff Sergeant Chen has a problem with me. Anyone who wants to test that can step forward right now. No one moved. No one spoke. The most dangerous man in the facility had just placed his protection over the new inmate everyone had been prepared to victimize. But Ghost wasn't finished. He pulled up his own sleeve, revealing a tattoo on his forearm that was remarkably similar to Marcus's. 3 interlocking triangles, slightly different in design but unmistakably related. Below it, different numbers, different unit designation. Same meaning. Purple Heart recipients, Ghost explained to the crowd. Combat wounded. This ink means he bled for his country before he ever set foot in here. The revelation rippled through the yard like wildfire. Purple Heart. Combat wounded. The simple tattoo they'd been mocking was one of the highest honors a soldier could receive. It meant Marcus hadn't just served his country. He'd been wounded in service to it. Thompson, the big inmate who'd started the confrontation, was now backing away, his face pale. The other loudmouths had already disappeared into the crowd, hoping to avoid Ghost's attention. "Sergeant," Ghost said, turning back to Marcus, "walk with me." They moved away from the crowd, toward the far end of the yard, where Ghost conducted his business away from prying eyes. As they walked, Marcus noticed something he hadn't seen before. Other inmates were nodding respectfully as they passed. Not the fearful acknowledgement Ghost usually received, but genuine respect directed at Marcus. "How bad were you hit?" Ghost asked when they were out of earshot. "IED outside Gardez. Took shrapnel in my leg and shoulder. 3 weeks in Landstuhl, 6 months physical therapy at Walter Reed." Marcus paused. "Could have been worse. Lost 2 good men that day." Ghost nodded grimly. "Roadside bomb in Ramadi. Shattered my left arm, punctured lung, concussion. 8 months recovery. My whole squad made it out, but barely." They walked in silence for a moment, 2 combat veterans processing memories that never fully faded. "What brought you here?" Ghost asked. "Drinking. Started after I got back. Wife left, took my daughter, lost my job. One night I got behind the wheel when I shouldn't have. Killed a school teacher driving home from work." Ghost stopped walking. "Damn, Sergeant. That's heavy. Every day I think about her family. What they lost because I couldn't handle my own problems." Marcus stared at the ground. "I deserved worse than 18 months. Maybe," Ghost said. "But you're here now. And in here, your past service matters more than your current conviction. At least to the people who understand what that ink really means." They'd reached the corner of the yard, where Ghost's inner circle usually gathered. 3 men who served as his lieutenants were already there, watching the approaching pair with curiosity and concern. They'd seen their leader show respect to fellow gang members, to older inmates who'd earned their place in the hierarchy. But they'd never seen him walk across a yard to personally escort a new arrival. "This is Staff Sergeant Chen," Ghost announced to his men. "Combat veteran, Purple Heart. He's under my protection." The lieutenants exchanged glances but nodded respectfully. In Ghost's organization, questioning his decisions was a quick way to find yourself on the wrong end of a sharpened piece of metal. "Sergeant, these are my people. Martinez, Rodriguez, and Thompson." Ghost gestured to each man in turn. "You need anything? You go through them. You have problems. They handle it. Clear?" Marcus nodded, still processing the rapid transformation of his situation. An hour ago, he'd been a target. Now he was under the protection of the most powerful man in the facility. "One thing, though," Ghost continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "This protection comes with expectations. You don't embarrass me. You don't make me look weak. You handle yourself with the same honor you showed in uniform." "Understood." "Understood," Marcus replied. "Good. Now let me explain how things work around here." For the next 3 days, Marcus learned what it meant to be under Ghost's protection, in a place where alliances could mean the difference between survival and a trip to the morgue. The first lesson came during lunch. Marcus grabbed his tray and headed toward an empty table in the corner, same spot he'd been using since his arrival. But Martinez, one of Ghost's lieutenants, intercepted him halfway across the dining hall. "Not anymore, Sergeant," Martinez said, gesturing toward a different section of the room. "You eat with us now." The table Martinez led him to was prime real estate in the chow hall. Center position, clear sight lines to all entrances, close enough to the guards that weapons couldn't be drawn without immediate response. Ghost was already seated, flanked by his inner circle. As Marcus sat down, he noticed the subtle shift in the room's dynamics. Other inmates glanced over, whispered conversations, calculating how this new arrangement affected their own standing in the facility's complex social structure. "Prison politics," Ghost explained between bites of mystery meat. "Everything here is about perception, who you associate with, where you sit, how you carry yourself. Yesterday, you were nobody. Today, you're connected. That changes everything." "I didn't ask for special treatment," Marcus said quietly. "Doesn't matter what you asked for. Matters what you earned." Ghost pointed his plastic fork at Marcus's sleeve. "That ink says you already paid a price most of these guys never will. In my book, that counts for something." Rodriguez, the third lieutenant, leaned forward. "Boss, what about the Aryan Brotherhood? They've been asking questions about the new guy. Apparently Thompson's been running his mouth about what happened in the yard." Ghost's expression darkened. The Aryan Brotherhood controlled a significant portion of the prison's drug trade and had been testing Ghost's authority for months. Any sign of weakness would invite a power struggle that could turn the entire facility into a war zone. "Let them ask questions," Ghost said calmly. "But make it clear that Staff Sergeant Chen is off limits. Anyone who touches him answers to me personally." The message would spread through the prison's underground communication network within hours. In a place where information was currency and rumors could spark riots, Ghost's declaration carried the weight of law. But not everyone was willing to accept the new hierarchy without challenge. That evening, during recreational time in the common area, Marcus was reading in a corner chair when 3 inmates approached. He recognized their tattoos immediately. White supremacist symbols, crude but unmistakable. The Aryan Brotherhood's foot soldiers, testing boundaries. "Chen, right?" The leader was a thin man with hollow cheeks and eyes that held too much violence for someone barely out of his 20s. "Heard you got yourself a guardian angel." Marcus closed his book but remained seated. Standing would be seen as either aggression or fear, both dangerous in this context. "Just trying to do my time quietly," Marcus replied. "That's the thing, though. Quiet's not really an option anymore, is it? See, when Ghost puts his protection on somebody, it sends a message. Makes people wonder if he's getting soft." The other 2 inmates spread out slightly, positioning themselves to block Marcus's escape routes. Standard intimidation tactics, designed to make the target feel cornered and desperate. "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said, but his hand moved imperceptibly toward the edge of his chair, preparing to spring up if necessary. "Trouble's not what we want either. We just want to understand. What makes you so special that the most dangerous man in this place treats you like family?" Before Marcus could answer, a shadow fell across their conversation. Thompson, Ghost's lieutenant, had appeared with 2 other inmates, all wearing expressions that suggested violence was imminent. "Problem here?" Thompson asked, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone who enjoyed inflicting pain. The Aryan Brotherhood soldiers immediately stepped back. They'd come to intimidate Marcus, not start a war with Ghost's crew. "No problem," the leader said quickly. "Just getting acquainted with our new neighbor." "Good," Thompson replied. "Because if there was a problem, we'd have to solve it. And our solutions tend to be permanent." The white supremacists melted away into the crowd, but Marcus knew this wouldn't be the end of it. He'd become a symbol in a larger conflict, whether he wanted to be or not. "Thanks," Marcus said to Thompson. "Don't thank me. Thank the boss. He's the one keeping you breathing." Thompson studied Marcus with calculating eyes. "But understand something, Sergeant. This protection comes with a price. Ghost's got enemies in here who'd love to see him look weak. You become a liability. You become a problem. Problems get solved. That night, lying in his narrow bunk, Marcus stared at the ceiling and wondered how his life had become so complicated. 3 months ago, he'd been a construction foreman with a drinking problem. Now he was a protected asset in a prison power struggle that could explode into violence at any moment. Rodriguez, his cellmate, sensed his tension. "You're thinking too hard, Fish. In here, thinking gets you killed. You just react, survive, adapt." "How long have you been inside?" Marcus asked. 4 years, drug trafficking. Got caught with 2 kilos of heroin and a trunk full of cash. Rodriguez rolled over to face Marcus. "You know what I learned my first week? There's only 2 types of inmates in here. Predators and prey. Everything else is just details. Which one am I? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Yesterday you were prey. Today you're something else. Tomorrow?" Rodriguez shrugged. "Depends on how smart you are." The next morning brought a new test. During work detail in the prison laundry, Marcus found himself assigned to the same shift as several Aryan Brotherhood members. The supervisor, a corrections officer named Davis, either didn't know about the tension or didn't care. The work was monotonous, loading industrial washing machines, moving heavy bags of dirty uniforms, operating equipment that should have been replaced decades ago. But monotony was better than conflict. So Marcus focused on his tasks and tried to avoid eye contact with the white supremacists. That strategy lasted exactly 43 minutes. "Chen." The voice belonged to the same thin inmate from the previous evening. "We need to talk." Marcus continued loading uniforms into a washing machine, pretending he hadn't heard. But the man moved closer, blocking Marcus's access to the detergent dispenser. "I said we need to talk. And I said I don't want any trouble." Marcus straightened up, meeting the man's gaze directly. "Trouble's already here, boy. Question is whether you're smart enough to see it." Other inmates in the laundry had stopped working, sensing the escalating tension. Officer Davis was on the far side of the room, reviewing paperwork, oblivious to what was developing. "See, here's the thing about your buddy Ghost," the white supremacist continued. "He's been top dog in this place for 3 years. But power shifts. Always does. And when it shifts, his friends become targets." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that preceded violence. The same feeling he'd experienced countless times in Afghanistan. That split second when a situation went from tense to lethal. "You got a choice to make," the man pressed. "You can stick with Ghost and go down with him when his time comes. Or you can make new friends. Friends who might be running this place real soon." "I'm not interested in running anything," Marcus replied. "I just want to finish my time and go home to my daughter." Touching. Real touching. But see, that's not how this works. You don't get to stay neutral. Ghost made sure of that when he claimed you in front of everybody. The man reached into his pocket, and Marcus tensed, ready to fight. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small piece of paper. "My people want to meet with you, tonight. Storage room B after lights out. Come alone." He pressed the paper into Marcus's hand and walked away, leaving Marcus holding what felt like a death sentence. The rest of the work shift passed in a blur. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. If he went to the meeting, he risked betraying Ghost's protection and walking into a trap. If he didn't go, he'd be seen as refusing to negotiate, which could provoke an immediate attack. But there was a third option, one that required him to trust the very people who'd already saved his life twice. That afternoon, Marcus found Ghost in the prison library, reading a biography of Alexander the Great. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus, that a man who controlled territory through violence was studying ancient military strategy. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said, sitting down across from Ghost. Ghost looked up from his book, immediately reading the seriousness in Marcus's expression. "What happened?" Marcus told him about the encounter in the laundry, the meeting request, the growing pressure from the Aryan Brotherhood. As he spoke, Ghost's face remained neutral, but his hands gradually clenched into fists. "They're testing boundaries," Ghost said when Marcus finished. seeing if they can turn you against me or make me look weak by failing to protect you. What do you want me to do? Ghost was quiet for a long moment, considering options. Around them, other inmates browsed books or pretended to read while eavesdropping on their conversation. You're going to that meeting, Ghost finally said. Marcus felt his stomach drop. I thought you said I was under your protection. You are. But protection doesn't mean hiding. It means having backup when you need it. Ghost leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You go to that meeting. Listen to what they have to say. Tell them you need time to think about it. Meanwhile, my people will be positioned around that storage room. If things go bad, we'll be ready. And if things go really bad, then we settle this once and for all. Ghost's eyes held the cold calculation Marcus had seen in combat veterans who'd learned to compartmentalize violence. But hopefully it won't come to that. These guys are bullies, not warriors. They pick on people they think are weak and back down when they face real strength. That evening, as the prison settled into its nighttime routine, Marcus lay in his bunk, counting down the minutes until the meeting. Rodriguez had gone to sleep early, either genuinely tired or smart enough to avoid involvement in whatever was about to happen. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus slipped out of his cell and made his way through the darkened corridors towards Storage Room B. The prison at night was a different world. Shadows stretched across empty hallways, and every sound echoed with ominous significance. He found the storage room exactly where the paper had indicated. The door was slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of his daughter's face, and stepped inside. 5 men were waiting for him, all white, all covered in supremacist tattoos, all radiating the kind of casual menace that came from years of institutionalized violence. The thin man from the laundry stood in the center, apparently their leader. Glad you could make it, Chen. Shows you're smarter than we thought. Marcus remained near the door, keeping his escape route clear. You wanted to talk. Talk. Straight to business. I respect that. The leader smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Here's the situation. Ghost's time is coming to an end. We've been building our strength, making alliances, preparing for change. When that change comes, you don't want to be standing on the wrong side. What kind of change? The kind where Ghost ends up in the infirmary or the morgue, and new leadership takes over. The kind where his friends find themselves without protection in a very dangerous place. Marcus felt the familiar pre-combat calm settling over him. These men were trying to recruit him through fear, but they'd made a crucial mistake. They assumed he was weak because he was new, because he'd been a target before Ghost's intervention. They had no idea what kind of man they were really dealing with. What exactly are you offering? Marcus asked. Simple. You provide us with information about Ghost's operations, his plans, his weaknesses. In return, when we take over, you become part of our organization. Protected status, better work assignments, access to contraband, all the benefits of being connected to power. And if I refuse? The smile disappeared from the leader's face. Then you find out what happens to people who choose the losing side. That's when Marcus heard it. The softest scrape of footsteps in the hallway outside. Ghost's people positioning themselves as promised. I need time to think about this, Marcus said. Time's not something you have much of. Ghost protection won't last forever. And when it ends, you better hope you've made the right choice. The meeting ended with handshakes that felt more like threats. As Marcus left the storage room, he caught a glimpse of Thompson melting back into the shadows. Ghost's network was more extensive than he'd realized. The next morning brought news that would change everything. During breakfast, word spread through the dining hall like wildfire. The warden had received intelligence about a planned riot, orchestrated by white supremacist groups throughout the state prison system. Riverside Correctional was going into lockdown, effective immediately. As guards flooded the dining hall and ordered inmates back to their cells, Marcus caught Ghost's eye across the room. The gang leader's expression was grim but not surprised. The war everyone had been anticipating was about to begin. And that's the story of how a simple tattoo changed everything in a maximum security prison. Marcus Chen walked into Riverside Correctional as fresh meat, another scared suburban dad who'd made one terrible mistake. But that faded ink on his forearm told a different story. A story of sacrifice, honor, and blood shed for his country in the mountains of Afghanistan. When Ghost Morales saw those three interlocking triangles, he didn't see a weak new inmate. He saw a Purple Heart recipient, a combat veteran who'd earned his stripes in the worst possible way. And in a place where respect is measured in violence and fear, that kind of honor transcends everything else. The inmates who laughed that day learned a lesson they'd never forget. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who don't need to prove it. Sometimes the quiet guy in the corner has already been through hell and back. And sometimes a simple tattoo carries more weight than all the gang colors in the world. Marcus served his 18 months under Ghost's protection, never once having to raise his fist or compromise his principles. He walked out of prison the same man he walked in, but with something he hadn't expected to find behind those walls: respect from the most unlikely source imaginable.